Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we're going to be continuing on Rav Kook's Parish on Adon Olam, and we're going to be moving into a new element of what the tefillah is talking about. So the first stage of the tefillah, Adon Olam Hashem Malach B'Karam Kol Yitzir Nivra, describes the capacity of the infinite to manifest itself in finitude, or the koyach hagvul within the bilti gvul, or the yecholes, the possibility, or the malchus to Ein Sof that existed prior to the creation of the world. Then we spoke about le'es natzah b'chevtzo kol azay melech shemo nikra, that emergence of the koyach hagvul, of limitation, of the seder hashtalshlus into existence through the act of the tzimtzum, and all of the different iterations of measurement is for the purpose of creating the world as we understand it in the process of history, where that shame that existed within potential, that existed prior to the creation of the world, now emerges into actualization in the form of the existence of the world. We also described that after this koyach hagvul emerges out of the bilti gvul, or after finitude emerges out of the infinite, or after possibility emerges out of the individual where that possibility, so to speak, existed in a potential form, it returns back upwards to its primordial state. So all of that emergence and measurement and details and the limitations and expressions and simtsumim and differentiations and symptoms that are experienced in the hove, in the presentness of the koyach hagvul in its emergence, in the end it's going to ascend back upwards. Everything is perpetually elevating. The yerida is for the tachlis of an aliyah. But what we also said is that it's not simply a return of the finite back to its infinite source, as if it was just a return back to the way things were prior to the change of the potency of limitation emerging, but rather the return back upwards is megala. It reveals a taisefes kishet, that reveals an additional adornment towards perfection, which reveals the perfectibility at the heart of perfection. Meaning, before the creation of the world, before the Malchus Ein Sof Kavyachal was yoitze into Gilui, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu was perfect in all manners of perfection, b'chvayu v'atzmo. But we didn't know what would happen when we engaged with the opposite of perfection, with limitation. So the entire purpose of creation is for the perfect to emerge into a state of imperfection, to reveal that imperfection is also part of perfection, thereby opening up and expanding the light of perfection, which now includes imperfection within it as well. So the aliyah of the koyach hagvul, or the malchus de Ein Sof, back to its original source from whence it came, is not simply a return back to the things as they always have been in some static way, but rather it's a return with dynamism, with the changeability. Now the infinite gets to reveal itself over and over with this newfound capacity of functioning within finitude and limitation as well. So that's v'acharei kachlos hakol levado yimlach nora. The tefillah continues, v'hu haya, v'hu hoyive, v'hu yihye b'tifara. And he was, and he is, and he will be in its beauty, in the grandeur of it all. So we're going to see exactly how this summarizes the previous three stages of Adon Olam Asher Malach B'Terem Kol Yitzir Nivra, which was the Haya before. Then there's the Le'es Nasa B'Chavtzo Kol Azay Melech Shemo Nikra, which is the now, which is the present, which is the Hove. And then we're going to see the Acharei Kachlos HaKol Levad Yimlech Neira, which is the Yihya, which is that which will be. And we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name, which is Haya, Hove, V'Yihya, all exist in one fell swoop. So this part of the tefillah is going to come and summarize the three stages that we just saw in the emergence, manifestation, and return of existence back to its unlimited roots, but it's also going to unify them in a fundamental way. Amnan amarnu. Shehahavaya beklalusa yarda kol kach harbe yeridos meyasaid or ein sofa elyon ad asher nitztamtzema be'olamei hahargasha v'hizgalus shel hayitzira v'asiya u'mekoyros havyasam hamugvalim. So we have already spoken about how existence in its most generalized way of looking at it has descended so much and has degraded itself through so many stages of tzimtzum and yerida and degradation from its original rootedness in the light of the infinite that existed above, to the point that it has come down and congealed itself and concealed itself within the world of experience, within the world of emotions, in the world of hargasha, in a felt sense, and in the emergence of worlds of separation themselves. This koyach of existence emerges out of the infinite, and it comes all the way down, even to the levels of Yitzira and Asiya, which is the dir b'tachtonim, u'mekoyres havyasam hamugveles, to the extent that they emerge and they manifest in the form and the source of their limited existence. V'chein hoyrenu l'das, and we also informed ourselves, and we also made ourselves aware of the fact she'if hevdel gadol b'toichin u'b'matzav shel ha'havaya b'klaliusa ben ha'avar shelo b'hayoyse b'chevyon ois ha'yechoyles ha'elyona ha'in soifis belua b'chlal kol ha'efshariyas ha'lihis she ein lokates v'tachlis u'ben ha'maimed shel ha'hoy ve'hamugvo ve'erchem shel nimtsoyim b'tiurim ha'metziuti. Ubein hesalusam ha'achrayna ha'mu'ula b'mamad ha'ishtavus b'gufa d'malka ha'ashava shel ha'havayas b'mekoyren ha'elyon b'pe'er chai kol olamim kechleis ha'kol. So we already explained, says Rav Kook, we have already shown ourselves that there is a tremendous distinction between the content and the status of existence in its generalized form, between that which was in the past when it continued to exist in its infinite source, prior to its emergence, when it existed in that elevated state of possibility, ha'in soifit, that existed without any limit, where that potential towards existence prior to its emergence was subsumed and negated in its existence within the infinite possibility of godliness, that had no limit whatsoever. So we already made a distinction between the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu functioned before creation, and between how we choose to view existence in its present limited valued state as it expresses itself in its descriptions of existence, as well as the difference between the stage of existence and its manifestation in its actualization, and what will happen when it eventually ascends in the end to the loftiest heights imaginable. Which is described as the state of fully being drawn to the gufa de malka, the body of the king, kaviyachol. The return of all existence to their elevated source, with all of the beauty of the life of all worlds, kechlois hakol. So what Rav Kook is saying, so we've already seen these three levels of haya, hoy, v'veniyah, of terem kol yitzir nivra, of be'es nasa b'chavtso kol, and ba'achari kechlos hakol. We already discussed how, in relationship to the past from whence it came, that original unlimited space, limitation and existence is seen as something that is so degraded and so low and so thick in relation to the ascendant space of infinitude from which it came, as well as when comparing it to the future role when it returns back upwards, where there's going to be a purified state and a refinement of being to the extent that it now returns back to the infinite. We already described the great separation between the stage of prior to manifestation, manifestation, and post-manifestation. These three gradational levels, the Haya, Hoiva, and Yihya, generally speaking, we know what the stark separation between these dargan are. Kol eila hashinuyim, but Rav Kook is adding now what happens when we look at it from a higher perspective of that which never is part of the conversation, that infinitude itself, kavyachol, atzmusi isbarach, because like we said already, Adon Olam Hashem Malach B'Taram Kol Yitzin Nivra, even the beginningness and even the end of existence, the emergence as well as the eventual retreat back upwards, both of those are still talking about Or Ein Sof. Both of those are still talking about the original manifestation of godliness into existence to the extent that it can now be spoken about, even though that speaking about it can only be by way of negation, or Ein Sof. It's a light without any limit. It's an infinite light. It's a light of the infinite. But nevertheless, as high and lofty as that ideal is, which is the anchoring kind of top of the entire system, in the end of the day, it still doesn't come close, even one iota of definition in relation to the true essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kavyachol, which exists beyond and underneath and in and through the Haya Hoiva and Yiyah. So in spite of the fact that we see all of these gradational differences between past, present, and future, between that which was, that which is, and that which will be, that is all in relationship to one another from a relative positioning. But all three of them, even the loftiest heights of Haya, that which was prior to the emergence of being, that which is during being, and that which will be after being reverts back to its source, all of those are considered in one fell swoop as limitation in relationship, be'erech, the true source of all things, the Yesod HaKoil, which is the Ein Sof B'chvaydo Uva'atzmo, the Atzmus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kavyachol, which we only know about by way of knowing that we can never even begin to apply any type of language to it, whether it be positive assertions or even negative kind of contemplations. We have absolutely no grasp whatsoever. And from that lofty position, Haya Hoiva and Yiyah, in spite of all of the differentiations and the gradational levels between the two, between the three, are all going to be seen in one fell swoop in relation to the true source. Kol elu hashinuyim, all of these changes, ein lahem yachas ve'erach ki ela ela metzias ha'olamis. These distinctions between past, present, and future, between Haya, Hoiva, and Yiyah, are only true in relationship to existence as it relates to reality, as it relates to being, as it relates to some sort of creation. El ha'havayos bebechinas ha'atzmis, with regards to the essential nature of creation itself, but not the essential nature of the creator. It's only by way of the creation itself that we have these gradations of past, present, and future. But when it comes to the ascendant wholeness, the perfection of all perfection, shleimusa dekula, the wholeness that has no wholeness after it, that which can't be spoken about, ein kol ela hashinuyim chalem klal. All of these distinctions, even the distinction between Haya, Hoiva, and Yihya, of the upper levels of unity and the lower levels of unity, none of them have any place in relationship to the ascendant wholeness in its true form. In the ascendant and transcendent strength of its holiness, which implies a perpetual removal from the ability of grasp. Kadosh is muvdal. Ein shayach shum hevdel v'hevrish klal bein hamayimot shel ha'avar shel koydem shenivra olam be'esha kol haya olam biyam ha'aviri ha'elyon shekol avshariyas ha'ein sofius. That from that perspective of the ascendant wholeness of all things beyond any language, which surrounds and subsumes and saturates that which was, that which is, and that what will be, Ein shayach shum hevdel v'hefresh. It's not shayach. There's no relatability to a concept of separation or distinction whatsoever between the way things were in the past, when things existed koidim shenivra olam, before the creation of the world, in a time be'esha hakol haya alum biyam ha'aviri ha'elyon shel kol ha'efshariyut ha'in sofiyut. Listen to how Rav Kook is describing that stage of haya before the koyach hagvul was yotze. He says at that point, when everything, in the time when everything was concealed anonymously within the ascendant sea of air of the infinite possibilities. And between the perspective of existence as it exists right now, with all of its ascent and descent and limitation, or between the eventual event that we are looking towards, that wondrous future orientation that is filled with the shining brilliance of the light. When everything returns back to its foundation in the true form of its existence with an additional adornment. All of these distinctions have absolutely no place in relationship to the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kavyachol, which perpetually remains outside of any type of grasp whatsoever. But in truth, everything is singular and unified in one fell swoop of unity in all of the levels, before, during, after, Lagabe Elyoinius Kavod Kel HaMeroimim. In relationship, in the relative positioning to the ascendancy of the true honor of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of Kel, who is Meroimim, who is transcendent of even transcendence, that is ascendant above any type of change or any type of activity or engagement or any type of tumura or any type of shifting and transitioning. V'hu haya, v'hu hayve, v'hu yihya, ha'avar, ha'hoive, ha'osid. It was, it will, it was, it is, and it will be. The past, the present, and the future. Im hashinuyim ha'atzumim shebahavayos. With all of the intense and radical shifts that are applied to each and every one of those levels. the beginning, the middle, and the end, before creation, creation, and after creation, none of them make any difference in relation to the true essence of godliness, Kavyachol. Hu be'echad, it's all unified betifara, in the silent, impossible beauty of Atzmusa Yasparach, betiferes gedulaso ha'elyoina v'ha'mefuara, in its true form of the Tiferes ha'elyon, not talking about a sphere of Tiferes or parts of Tiferes, unless a person is learning in accordance with the Rashash and the sugya of Atika Hiza and Zohu Atika, which is a fundamental sugya. But over here, Tiferes Gadlusa Ha'elyoina Ma'mefura represents, it hints towards the fact that we have no idea the source of the beauty. We have no idea the source of all things, but it is the source that contains everything, and the past, the present, and the future are unified together in it. She'ein kol shinui v'chilaf toifes boi klal v'ikr. There's no transitional changes that can have any grasp in that place. Ki ein mitzido shum erech klal, because in and of itself it has absolutely no relational connection to anything other than itself. Hashem Elokeichem emes. It's impossible for anything to ever come close enough to be considered to be in the same categorization of the infinitude that we need to begin to learn how to think about or unthink about in relationship to the etzem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kavyachol. Again, the fact that it is unfathomably and irreducibly distant from us does not change for one iota of an even split second of a moment, the most irreducible pocket of time imaginable, that there is nothing ever devoid of the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light. The essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light is everything that there is. Hakol hu bakol. It's not a question of it being present. It's always present. The question is one of accessibility through language, thought, and contemplation, which are of utmost significance if a person takes these concepts seriously. That the fact that it always remains above and beyond even the gradational shifts between the past of before history, the present of history, and the future after history, none of those make any distinction. They're but a blip on the radar, if even that, in relationship to the essence of godliness. It doesn't take away one iota of the value that can take place by the descent and the eventual ascent. But what it does is it reminds us that it has no shaykhis bichlal. She'ein kol shinoi v'chiluf toifes by klal v'ikr. There's no shifts and there's no changes whatsoever. Ki ein mitzido shum erech klal. It has no definable value in and of itself. La'achiluf shel ha'haya, shel ha'hoive v'shel ha'yiyah, kol ha'aliyos v'chol ha'roimimus. It has no relation to the past, to the present, or to the future, to all of the ascendancy and to all of the transcendence. V'chol mashu be'ein aruch yoyter v'yoyter nifshka min hakol. And everything that is more ein aruch l'cha, to come to a hakara of ein aruch, that helps us understand that even when we come to the loftiest level of our understanding, we're still in aruch l'cha. There's absolutely no gradational value. There's no relative positioning in which point a person can say that they have begun to grasp the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, chalila v'chas, because it's always kedushasi l'malam mikdusha seichem. And when I come to a place where I think that I've chapped something and that there's an erich between me and the highest point imaginable, and then I have to come to realize that in relationship to its true ascendancy, I have absolutely no relational closeness whatsoever. It draws more bittul, an opportunity for bittul and alios ein kates, to realize that there's a perpetual ascendancy above, because in relationship to where I can go, I've never even begun to move. Everything is contained within this essence that remains inaccessible. The past, the present, the future, all of the shifts, they're all nichlal in the tifara. They're all nichlal in that beautiful grandeur that emerges out of that place of l'chod dumya tehila. That the only way that I can begin to possibly praise you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is by way of dumya, is by way of the silent recognition that I can't ever come close to being toifes anything. And when a person comes to understand that, then they begin to enter into the Razin HaYichud. They begin to enter into a place of being mamshech in Adon Olam Be'ezras Hashem.